Welcome to the Office on Violence Against Women pre-application call for the fiscal year 2020 Training and Technical Assistance Initiative solicitation. My name is Neelam Patel, and I am the OVW team lead for Training and Technical Assistance. Also on the webinar is Suhail Lasky, OVW Grant Financial Management Division Financial Analyst. It is not the intent, nor is there sufficient time to go over every aspect of the solicitation. Therefore, this webinar will go over specific sections of the solicitation. All applicants are responsible for reviewing the solicitation in its entirety. It will be useful for you to have a copy of the solicitation either printed or downloaded during this call, as we will be referring to specific sections of the solicitation and page numbers. Please note that the application process, OVW staff cannot provide any feedback pertaining to the quality of your application or provide feedback on proposed project deliverables. OVW staff cannot provide information outside of that presented in the solicitation that would give an advantage or even the appearance of an advantage to an applicant. OVW staff is available throughout the open period to address any questions about the solicitation's application requirements. Please feel free to send all questions to ovw.techassistance@usdoj.gov. The first item I will go over are the due dates. First, and most importantly, the application due date is Wednesday, February 26, 2020, no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time through grants.gov. Please plan your submission accordingly so you do not miss the due date and time. I will discuss the submission process later in the presentation. Also, the letter of intent due date is January 29, 2020. I will discuss the letter of intent later in the presentation. Finally, all applicants must obtain a Data Universal Number system called DUNS for short, and register online with the System for Award Management called SAM for short, as well as register for grants.gov as soon as possible if you anticipate submitting an application. And it's highly recommended to complete the registration no later than January 29, 2020. Before I move on in the presentation, I would like to provide you all with a list of acronyms you will see throughout the solicitation. This is for your reference to review the solicitation. For example, you will see TTA throughout the solicitation. This means Training Technical Assistance. And the short name of the OVW Training and Technical Assistance Initiative is TA Initiative. The primary purpose of the OVW TA Initiative is to provide direct training technical assistance to existing and potential grantees and sub-grantees to enhance and support their efforts to implement their projects that are supported by OVW grant funds. OVW TA is designed to build the national capacity of justice system professionals and victim service organizations to respond effectively and efficiently to domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. It is also to help foster partnerships among organizations that may have traditionally or not traditionally worked together to address violence against women. Please note that proposed activities must serve one or more of the grant programs and eligible entities and individuals to receive OVW grant funds. I recommend that you visit the OVW website to learn more about the OVW grant programs and to determine which programs you propose as the target audience for your project. OVWT initiative is not intended for applicants seeking funding to attend a training or to host a training or technical assistance event for their organization and community. For example, if you're looking specifically for funding to bring a training or a TA provider to your organization, this is not allowable under this solicitation. We are now going to move on to the purpose areas, which are covered on pages 2 through 9. OVW has 3 distinct categories of training and technical assistance: targeted, competitive comprehensive, and non-competitive comprehensive. OVW will support only the targeted and comprehensive TTA purpose areas identified in this solicitation. Applicants requesting to develop a targeted and comprehensive project for issues other than those listed in the solicitation will be removed from consideration. Applications that modify or expand an OVW purpose area including combining two or more purpose areas, will also be removed from consideration. To avoid confusion, OVW also requests that applicants applying for a targeted purpose area to refrain from using the word comprehensive in their project titles. Most of the purpose areas for fiscal 2020 are targeted purpose areas, and as explained in the solicitation, targeted purpose areas are intended to provide in-depth TA and training on a narrow topic within one or more of the prime areas. Also, as stated in the solicitation, OVW may make multiple awards for a targeted purpose area or may determine not to make an award for a targeted purpose area if there are no applications that effectively address the purpose area or if there are not sufficient funds to fully support the purpose area. Comprehensive TA projects are those that promote the consistent delivery of TA training for certain grant programs, professions, and core critical areas. Comprehensives are competed every 5 years. Applications proposing a competitive comprehensive area not listed in the solicitation will be removed from consideration. OVW will only make one award for each competitive purpose area, or OVW may determine not to make an award for a purpose area if there are no applications that effectively address the purpose area, or if there are not sufficient funds to fully support that purpose area. Current comprehensive TA grantees that are eligible for non-competitive comprehensive funding in 2020 to continue one of the non-competitive comprehensive projects listed in the solicitation will be contacted directly by OVW. Applications for a non-competitive comprehensive purpose area who are not a TA provider already funded for these non-competitive comprehensive purpose areas listed in the solicitation will be removed from consideration. Please note that OVW will only support the targeted and comprehensive projects identified in the purpose area section of the solicitation only. Again, applications that propose to develop projects other than those listed in the solicitation will be removed from consideration. Please also respond to the purpose area description content for which you are applying for. It is the responsibility of the applicant to list the purpose area for which they are applying on the summary data sheet, which I will cover later in this webinar. Please note there is not a limit to how many purpose areas an organization can apply for. However, applicants must clearly distinguish which purpose area they are applying for in each application and in the summary data sheet. Applicants must submit separate distinct applications for each purpose area for which they are applying. OVW will not match submitted applications for the purpose area. So if you are applying for multiple purpose areas and you have multiple applications submitted in grants.gov and the wrong item is attached to each application, OVW will not match the correct document to each application. The project period and amount of funds is listed for each purpose area in the solicitation, and we request that you do not exceed this amount or the project period. OVW has 4 office-wide priorities for 2020. They are listed on page 8. Many of the TA purpose areas address one or more of the priority areas. Applicants are encouraged to incorporate one or more of the priorities into their proposed project as and if appropriate. Out-of-scope activities are listed on page 9. Please review this section carefully. An application that does not sufficiently address one of the enumerated purpose areas in the solicitation will be deemed as out of scope. Also, I do want to mention that one of the out-of-scope activities is direct victim services, which is unallowable under the OVWTA initiative. Also, training and technical assistance focused on a single state, region, or geographic community, unless specified in the specific purpose area, is considered out of scope. Page 10 lists activities requiring prior approval. If you include any of these activities, such as surveys and an in-person event, please make sure you clearly understand and that you clarify in your application that you must seek OVW approval for these activities if you're funded for the purpose area. Page 10 explains the availability of funds and that funding is not guaranteed in the future. including for purpose areas, new and continuation purpose areas, and all awards are subject to availability of appropriated funds. I will now move on to the award periods and amounts, which is listed for each of the competitive purpose areas. And I've already stated it before that applicants should not exceed the amounts stated for each of the purpose areas or exceed the project period. Applicants should also be realistic of how much funding will be needed to accomplish their proposed project for the purpose area. So for example, if the applicant determines that a project will need $400,000 to accomplish the project under a specific purpose area, and the cap for that purpose area is $500,000, then the applicant should really apply for the amount they need and not increase the amount to meet the $500,000 cap, even if they don't need that full amount. Non-competitive comprehensive applicants will be contacted directly by their program specialist to determine the amount of their application. All fiscal year 2020 TA awards will be made as cooperative agreements, which will require an active participation with OVW in the development and implementation of the project. I'll now move on to types of applicants. Continuation applicants are either an applicant that has an existing TA award for the purpose area for which they are applying for, or a recently closed TA award, which is within the last 12 months of the purpose area, for the purpose area for which they are applying for in fiscal year 2020. New applicants are applicants that either never received OVW funding under the TA initiative or current and past recipients of OVW TA funding. They're applying for a purpose area for which they have not received funding for in the past, or is a past recipient of a purpose area for which the project has been closed for over 12 months. I also want to mention that all current TA grantees with a substantial amount of funding remaining in projects that they're applying for a purpose area this year and has enough money remaining as of March 31st, 2020, without adequate justification, may not be considered for funding or may receive a reduced award amount if selected for funding for that purpose area in fiscal year 2020. Page 11 lists the mandatory program requirements for the TA initiative. Please make sure your application includes the amount required in your budget for attending OVW sponsored training, which means sending your proposed project staff to OVW training for their own skill building and development. See the budget section for more information on the required amount. Also, all applicants must include a planning period for their proposed project, and a period of time for the planning of the project must be incorporated in the timeline, which is in the What Will Be Done section, which will be covered later in the presentation. The period of time for planning the project is really at the applicant's discretion, and it will be reviewed accordingly based on what they are proposing. Page 11 lists eligible applicants for the program, also listed on the cover of the solicitation. Please note that all applicants must have the capacity and expertise to provide training and technical assistance at a national level. Please note that applicants are limited to one application per purpose area. Applicants submitting applications for multiple purpose areas must apply separately for each purpose area and have different titles. If an applicant submits multiple applications for one purpose area, OVW will only review the most recently submitted application in grants.gov before the deadline. Next, I will move on to letter of intent. Although not required, it is encouraged that applicants submit a letter of intent to the OVW Tech Assistance at usdoj.gov email address by January 29, 2020. This will ensure that applicants are well positioned to successfully submit their applications by the deadline. Letters should state that the organization is registered and current with their SAM and grants.gov registration. Applicants should also list all the purpose areas their organization anticipates applying for, include the number of the purpose area and the title. This letter will not obligate potential applicants to submit an application, nor for interested applicants who do not submit a letter of intent. They are still eligible to apply. Moving on to the application requirements, as stated on page 13, a complete application includes the summary data sheet, project narrative, budget worksheet and narrative, the memorandum of understanding, which is MOU for short, and one letter of support. Applications missing either the project narrative, budget, MOU, and the letter of support will be deemed as incomplete and not considered for funding. Please read the application criteria very carefully for each section and respond to the criteria requested in each section. Also, please follow the formatting technical requirements as stated in the solicitation. Points may be deducted for applications that do not adhere to formatting requirements. As I mentioned previously, the summary data sheet will be required in the solicitation, in the application. The summary data sheet is explained on page 13. Summary data sheet is scored and worth 5 points, but an application is not deemed incomplete if you're missing the summary data sheet. However, this document is very important as it lists important information about the applicant. Specifically, you should list the purpose area for the application in the summary data sheet, the number and purpose area title, as well as the grant programs you're targeting. And again, please visit the OVW website if you are unfamiliar with all of the OVW grant programs. The summary data sheet should also include the title of your proposed project. We request that you use simple and clear project titles. Also, please list all your project partners in the summary data sheet and include the amount of funding that each partner will receive in the project. Additionally, the summary data sheet asks applicants to include a list of other federal grant programs for which the applicant currently receives funding or will be applying for in fiscal year 2020 to do similar work, as well as a list of current awards or projects applying for at OVW. The summary data sheet is not included in the page limit of the project narrative. So now to the project narrative, which is worth 65 points, which consists of the purpose of the application, what will be done, and who will implement. Please note that applicants applying for a targeted purpose area are limited to 20 pages, double-spaced, for their project narrative, and competitive, comprehensive, and non-competitive comprehensives are limited to 25 pages, double-spaced. For each section of the project narrative, applicants must respond to the criteria for that each section, and projects should be responsive to the purpose area and the target audience. Also, the Who Will Implement section asks for resumes or job descriptions for all key personnel. These resumes and job descriptions are not part of the maximum page limit for the project narrative. Also, please do not include photos or images in your project narrative. Again, as mentioned previously, please follow the font and spacing requirements if you are using a chart in your project narrative. For the What Will Be Done section, you must provide a clear link between the proposed activities and the need that you identified in the purpose of the application section. One question we receive frequently is what types of delivery methods should an applicant propose in their project? The delivery methods applicants choose for the proposed project should be best suited for the goals and objectives stated in the application, and those that will be the most effective in providing the training TA to the grantees. So for example, one applicant may be proposing mostly webinars or e-learnings for one purpose area, and then for another purpose area for which they are applying for, maybe they're proposing a hybrid of in-person and webinars along with on-site technical assistance. As stated in the criteria in the What Will Be Done section, applicants must explain why a particular delivery method is appropriate for that target audience and profession. And also explain what is your expertise with that delivery method. I also want to draw your attention to the criteria on accessibility in the What Will Be Done section. All TA training for OVW must be responsive to individuals with disabilities, individuals that are hard of hearing or deaf, or limited English proficient. Finally, as I stated previously, a planning period is required in the project narrative. The timeline, which is included in the what will be done section, must be included in the body of the project narrative and should not be a separate. Moving on to the budget, which is worth 15 points. As stated previously, each purpose area has a budget cap and project period. Please note that the budget is not part of the 20 to 25 pages for the project narrative. Please make sure you've carefully considered the resources needed to successfully implement the proposed project. As I stated and explained earlier with the example, just determine how much funding you actually need for that purpose area, and if you don't need the full cap, then don't apply for the full cap. You just want to make sure that you apply for the amount of money that will help you successfully implement the proposed project. As a reminder, OVW has the discretion to make awards for greater or lesser amounts than requested and to negotiate the scope of work and the budget prior to an award of a grant. Keep in mind that costs in the budget should correlate with what the applicant is proposing in their project narrative, and there must be a clear link in the budget with the project narrative. So, for example, if your budget includes expenses for in-person training in the budget, then the in-person training should be listed in the project narrative. Also, for staffing, if you've listed someone in the budget or to be hired position, you should be discussing that position also in the project narrative, and that the first time a person's name or position is mentioned shouldn't be in the budget. As I mentioned earlier, there is a requirement for OVW training for TA providers, so keep in mind that all applicants need to include funds to attend OVW sponsored events and trainings. That funding is also to attend any required OVW training meetings that you will be required to attend as a TA provider. This funding is required for all applicants, even if you are in the District of Columbia or in the greater DMV area. Additionally, please be mindful that all applicants must make their trainings in TA accessible, as I explained earlier, which may include translation materials, interpreters, captioning, etc. You must include those expenses in your budget. Finally, please refer to the conference planning and expenditures limits in the solicitation if you are proposing in-person meetings and trainings, and review that section very carefully when you're allocating funds to these activities. The next couple slides are going to focus on the aspects of your application that relate to the documents that our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, GFMD, reviews. More specifically, we'll discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior year applications that could help with expediting our review process.
Hi, thanks, Neelam. So for today, we're going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that's part of your application package. So the first things that we'll highlight are the items identified in the summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. Specifically, we'd like to discuss the single audit response and the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure. So OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If they have, then they indicate that on the data summary sheet and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. However, we're finding that applicants don't always include this information and leave out whether or not they've met the threshold, or maybe they'll leave out the date of the last fiscal year, and that part isn't included. So please ensure that this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet. Another item we'd like to highlight from the solicitation is specifically for nonprofit organizations. If you use the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive's compensation, then you must reference the additional information section that provides the required disclosure letter. So we'd like to highlight that there are 4 parts of this disclosure letter that must be provided to OVW in order to comply with this requirement. The sample letter outlines all 4 parts of the disclosure, so please be sure to follow the sample and provide a response to each of the 4 pieces. The next item we'd like to discuss are the financial accounting practices, which assist us during the pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 10 questions, and each question has multiple parts. We've noticed from prior years that applicants don't always fully answer all parts of the questions, which in turn requires us to reach out to the applicant, which may delay recommendations. One of the other things that happen is that maybe you are reusing the responses from a previous year's solicitation application. And we, from time to time, make changes to the questions. So you have to read through all of the questions fully and answer each of them fully before you submit it with your application. Some of the most common issues that we've encountered have been, for example, in question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures, and that's one of the secondary questions to that question as well. Another example of incomplete responses includes question number 3, where the applicant does not provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. So there's multiple layers to that question, and a lot of times we just see a response, yes, we track it, and there is no elaboration to that process which is required in that response. So these are just a few examples, but basically, please make sure that you read each part of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. This next slide will quickly highlight some resources that are available that should be used as you're creating the budget that's submitted with the application. We recently developed an in-depth training webinar on creating a budget for OVW applicants, and we're hoping to reduce any challenges you may face with the budget and make it clear what we look for when we review your budget. So this webinar provides some insight as to what we consider during our review. When you click the link at the top of the slide, it will take you to a list of resources for applicants. The first section, titled Budget Information, has multiple links, including the training webinar, which is called Creating a Budget. And there's another link in that same section called Sample Budget Detail Worksheet. And you're going to want to use that sample budget in conjunction with the webinar, because we use examples from that sample budget as we go through all the parts in the webinar. Next up on this list is the Uniform Guidance, which can be found in 2 CFR 200. Then another resource is the DOJ Financial Guide, as well as the program-specific solicitation. So if you need any assistance finding these resources, please just feel free to contact our help desk and ask. Which brings me to this last slide for us, which is the contact information for GSMD. We know a lot of the information that we just gave you is going to be a lot to process. So if you have any questions specifically about the financial information that we just discussed, please feel free to contact our GFMD Help Desk at 888-514-8556 or send us an email at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. Thanks, Neelam.
Moving on to the Memorandum of Understanding, which is also
MOU. The MOU is worth 10 points and is not part of the 20 to 25 pages for the project narrative. Please read this section very carefully and begin working on this section as soon as possible. The MOU should connect the project narrative activities and the budget. Applicants should start the development, as I said, as soon as possible because of the signatures involved. OVW requires all applicants to enter into an MOU with key partners who will bring the necessary substantial expertise to the project. So starting on the MOU as soon as possible is very important. Key project partners may include any organization or an individual that will have a significant role in the development and/or implementation of the proposed project, regardless of receiving financial compensation for their participation. Any partner that does receive financial compensation is considered a key partner. A letter of support or a letter of commitment from a partner in lieu of an MOU will not be considered in the place of the MOU. MOU should be signed and dated by the authorized representative of each proposed project partner agency or by the individual contractor or consultant. A question we received in the past is, does an organization need to get a signature of an outside accountant that they will be paying for under consultants category that works on their organization books? The answer is no. The accountant is not an MOU partner. Also, applicants must only submit one MOU with all the partners' signatures. Do not submit multiple MOUs for each partner. All partners must sign this one MOU. However, applicants can submit multiple signature pages. For example, if you have 8 partners, it might be very difficult to get all 8 signatures on one page. So maybe you have one signature per page, but make sure all signatures are legible if scanning the signature pages, and that all applicants should know who all the partners are, and all the partners' names should be listed on each signature page so that each of the partners knows who each other are on this project. There is no page limit to the MOU, but we do recommend that you do not go excessive with the MOU pages and include information not requested in the solicitation. For example, in the past, I've seen MOUs with over 15 to 30 pages, which did not include the signature pages, and the applicant still didn't respond to the criteria in the solicitation. So please remember, respond to the criteria requested. The letter of support is worth 5 points. Only one letter of support is required in fiscal year 2020. And if you submit multiple letters, only one of the letters will be reviewed and scored. And it will be at the discretion of the OVW reviewers, peer reviewers, and OVW to determine which letter will be reviewed and scored. For any applicant that has never had an OVWTA grant before, this is to let you know that you should include a letter from a recipient of any training or technical assistance that you provided in the past. Please make sure you provide the criteria in the solicitation for the letter of support to the organization and/or the individual that will be writing your letter of support. The organization and individual providing the letter of recommendation must write the letter, not the applicant. And please note that if you submit additional letter support, those letter supports will not receive additional points. Other documents to be submitted with your application include the abstract, which is not scored and should be a short summary of your project, non-supplanting letter, and the indirect cost rate agreement, if that's applicable. Also, please see page 19 for other required information. Please note that this year, continuation applicants for a purpose area are not required to submit a status of current project. So please do not submit a status of your current project. Next is the registration, which is on pages 22 to 23. To ensure that all applicants have ample time to complete the registration process, applicants must obtain their DUNS number, register online exam, and with grant immediately but no later than January 29, 2020. The lack of registration or not renewing your registration on SAM and grants.gov was the reason some past applicants were unable to submit their applications before the deadline. Failure to register in a timely manner or verify your organization's registration well in advance for the submission of the application are not situations of experiencing unforeseeable technical system issues to request a late submission. So I will now move on to late submission requests. These are explained on page 24. As I said before, you want to make sure you register well in advance and also upload your application as soon as possible, not so late to the end of the due date, because you want to anticipate any technology issues you might have with the uploading. Any applicant requesting a late submission must follow the instructions listed in the solicitation, which includes requests due to severe weather or natural disaster or technical issues beyond the applicant's reasonable control. Please contact OVW at the earliest possible date, but not later than 24 hours from the due date and the due time, and please note failure to begin the registration application submission in sufficient time or even having the correct Adobe version is not acceptable reasons for a late submission. So as I was mentioning right before was the correct Adobe software. We have seen this many times where applicants in the past have not been able to submit their application by the due date time because they did not have the correct version of Adobe on the computer where they were going to upload their application. Also, in order to make sure your application is successfully submitted in grants.gov, it is recommended that you begin the submission process at least 48 hours prior to the deadline, not later than 24 hours from the due date. Again, explains when I explained earlier is you do not know the technical issues that might occur with uploading your application. And it also gives you enough time to address any errors in your uploading of application. Also, as I explained previously, if your organization is submitting applications for multi-purpose areas, please make sure the correct attachments are uploaded with each application. In the past, we have seen applicants submitting multiple applications and for different purpose areas, and then they uploaded the wrong attachment to the wrong application. For example, maybe the wrong MOU to the wrong application. And OVW will not move the incorrect documents to the correct application. So again, this is a reason why to make sure you upload well in advance so you can catch those errors prior to the close of the solicitation. Now we'll move on to attaching your application in grants.gov. Page 28, there is a list of specific characters not to use in the titles of your attachment. Do not use any fancy characters to save your documents and upload in grants.gov. This has been an error many applicants have experienced when they try to upload their applications in grants.gov and it gets rejected. Also see page 28 when labeling your attachments. Label your documents for each application simply, such as Fiscal Year 2020 OVW Project Narrative or Fiscal Year 2020 OVW Budget. And if you're submitting multiple applications for different purpose areas, make sure you also list Fiscal Year 2020 OVW Budget Purpose Area number 1 or number 2. And please make sure you do not upload attachments multiple times. Many times we have seen applicants upload their project narrative or their MOU or budget 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and then we don't know which one to review. And going back to the labeling, you want to make sure again that's very clear and that you've uploaded the right one as well. As I discussed previously, organizations can submit applications for multiple purpose areas. Again, only one per purpose area, and do not combine all your applications into one application grants.gov. As we stated earlier, make sure you're uploading the correct documents to the correct application, label them correctly as well, and we will not move, OVW will not move documents to the correct application if you upload it to the wrong one. One area to discuss is the policy of duplicate applications. OVW will review the most recently submitted version of the application if you submitted an application multiple times for a purpose area. Additionally, please do not submit a test application to check if grants.gov is working. Submitting a test application will be considered an application for your organization. If you have technical issues, please make sure you contact grants.gov. One thing to keep in mind is if you are giving the responsibility to upload the application to someone in your organization, make sure that individual has access to their email and is checking on a regular basis to make sure there isn't a rejection from grants.gov due to uploading issues. As I mentioned earlier, uploading issues could be the incorrect characters, and that has been a frequent reason for late submission requests, where the person uploading it is on vacation the next day and isn't checking their email, and their application got rejected. OVW will not provide confirmation if applications were received. Just a couple of final reminders. The solicitation application is due Wednesday, the 26th, 2020. Register for SAMS, DUNS, and grants.gov no later than January 29, 2020. Make sure your SAMS registration is correct if you have one and is active, and that you have your correct login and password well in advance. Letters of intent are due January 29, 2020. Some other final reminders is to read the solicitation thoroughly. This was a very fast overview of the solicitation, so we do recommend that you carefully read the solicitation. To respond to the criteria and the purpose area description, and respond to the criteria in each section. Do not combine purpose areas and do not create your own purpose area. Double check all your attachments and label them accordingly. Do not submit multiple versions of the same application, and to start your uploading at least 48 hours from the due date and time. Finally, any last questions, emails? If you have questions and comments send them to the OVW Tech Assistance at usdoj.gov mailbox. Thank you very much.